Home Secretary James Cleverly. We say hello, good morning and welcome to him, Mr Cleverly. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well, Nigel Farage in Clacton, what do you think?
Well, look, it's interesting that he's changed his mind on this. I think it wasn't that long ago where he was questioning whether he really wanted to spend every Friday listening to the people of Clacton, but he's put himself forward, that's fine. But it doesn't change the fact that a vote for reform is exactly what Keir Starmer wants people to do if they're not going to vote Labour, because Keir Starmer knows that that is massively in his benefit, and a Labour government, particularly one that has a large majority, of course would look at taking us back into the European Union's sphere of influence, aligning ourselves with the European Union, opening our borders with free movement once again, taking the knee, all the things that I think most British people are uncomfortable with, and certainly that anyone that was thinking of voting reform I think would be very uncomfortable with. So, that's the choice at this election between Keir Starmer ripping us off to the hard left, or Rishi Sunak with a plan to make the country better in these uncertain times.
Yeah, and those are choices that the public will have to make. What about the choices that potentially members and colleagues of the party that remain after the election will have to make, perhaps yourself included? Assuming Nigel Farage wins, and perhaps we see a situation where some of your colleagues defect, or indeed Nigel Farage decides he wants to do either a deal with the Conservatives or to try and take down the Conservatives. I just wonder what your relationship would be like with Nigel Farage. Could you work with him? Would you welcome him back into the party? Would you like to do a deal with him? I mean, Kemi Badenoch yesterday saying, not welcome, he's campaigned against us for years. Surely there's some of you are tempted to try and bring him into the fold rather than have him as a problem on the outside.
Well, hang on a second. My plan is to get Giles Watling elected. He's the Conservative candidate in Clacton. He has been a fantastic champion for the local area, and I'm going to be making sure that I support my good friend and colleague to get re-elected and continue serving. But yes, and the point I'm saying is my plan is to make that a moot point, because I intend to get Giles elected. And the broad point is that the choice, and I know this is interesting news today, but the simple fact of the matter is this election is about a simple choice. It is a choice between Keir Starmer and a Labour Party which Angela Rayner is dragging to the left, even as we speak during this general election campaign, with question marks over our nuclear deterrent.
Well, we'll speak to Labour about that.
This is the leadership that took the knee whilst BLM protesters were attacking police officers in central London. And the alternative, the only credible alternative, is Rishi Sunak with a Conservative government that's committed to defending our nation, committed to defending our borders, committing to bringing down immigration. Those are the two options, and I think people who are thinking about voting reform should consider that when they go to the ballot box.
One of the things they may have to consider as well is this view by the government to put a workers' cap on foreign workers to lower the whole idea of emigration. There was like 750,000 foreign workers that we're having to deal with on this. But I put it to you, what would we do without these foreign workers?
Eamon, that's a really good point. And the challenge we've had in the last couple of years, because of the situation immediately after COVID, a lot of people not from the UK left the UK. Some of those then came back. We had a very generous offer to Afghans and Ukrainians and people from Hong Kong who are fleeing war and persecution. So the last couple of years, the figures have been much, much, much too high, including on legal immigration. And there are some people that like that large volume of legal migration for work purposes. But what we're doing now is we're saying in the future, we will balance both the benefits of immigration, of course there are benefits, but also the cost of immigration. And those two things have not been properly dealt with together. So we are going to commission the Migration Advisory Committee to come up with advice on the right balance of benefit and cost. Then the government will set an annual cap on how many visas that we will issue, and that's why we will have complete control in a way that we weren't able to do when we were members of the European.
If it was this simple
because until we left the European
surely...
Union,
yeah, go on.
So, until we left the European Union, we didn't have full control over migration policy.
You couldn't put a cap on the
and Keir Starmer, no, we couldn't, because remember the European Union, we had free movement. And Keir Starmer's a big fan of free movement. He said so over and over again. He would like to go back to having free movement.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This
immediately
cap
after
that you're
COVID, we had a very distorted set of
will not include the
circumstances.
634,000 foreign students that you've been permitting into the country, or seasonal workers. And there would be a separate cap for those people that we've welcomed into this country from places like Ukraine, Hong Kong and Afghanistan. So this is a tiny fraction of people that you're talking about.
So on students, you have to remember that when students come here, they study for a while, they spend money in the country, they're an export. I know it sounds a bit weird, people coming to the country being an export, but they count against our export figures because they bring foreign exchange into the UK, and ultimately at the end of their courses, they either leave or they transfer onto another visa route. Now, if they transfer, they will form part of these figures. Seasonal workers are typically only here for a couple of months during the kind of harvest time, for want of a better word. And again, they're very temporary. And when we do something, as we have done with the Ukrainian refugees fleeing Putin's brutal war, or Hong Kong Chinese who are fleeing persecution, it is right that we look at those differently. But this is the first time we're doing a proper analysis at the same time of the benefits and costs, putting a cap on the number of visas. And you compare that with the Labour Party, who Keir Starmer has said all immigration policy is inherently racist.
Mr. Cleverly.
And when you have that attitude, you know that a Labour government will have an open door policy.
But yet people seem to trust Labour more than you. You only have to see the bombshell poll that was published shortly after Rishi Sunak...
shouldn't.
Nigel Farage, his announcement yesterday, 5 o'clock, you get this bombshell poll which sees Labour on a 194-seat majority, the biggest election victory in history. And that was before Nigel Farage had announced that he was standing. It would probably be even worse if they did the poll today. People don't trust you.
Well, I think what people will see during this campaign, I think they'll certainly see it in tonight's debates, that the Labour Party have got a complete vacuum where their policies should be. Take my portfolio, for example. Their big announcement, this border command, which they said with great fanfare, it already exists. It is commanded by a former British Army general. It works with the intelligence and security agencies, both in the UK and overseas. It coordinates the actions across the Channel. Now, either Yvette Cooper doesn't know this organisation exists, which is pretty embarrassing if she hopes to be Home Secretary, or she does know it exists and she's basically lying to the British people. Either way, it's a really, really bad look. The Labour Party do not have a plan, and if they get into government, particularly if they get into government with a big majority, they will cut a deal with the EU, which will see us receiving more people than we're sending. They will have an amnesty for those people who are already here, because they said they will scrap the Rwanda plan, and they are not going to deport people back to Iran or Afghanistan or Syria, so they will have to have a blanket amnesty, and they should be honest with the British people about that.
Home Secretary, we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.